Right, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be one of those difficult videos I feel to film because I'm going to be experiencing quite a lot of emotions probably during this video, probably akin to when I first developed a roll of film in the lab box a couple years ago. But basically, I mistakenly made the mistake of thinking that because I could get 37, 38 exposures out of my more modern point and shoot film camera like the Olympus AF-1 Mini, that I could quite merrily go beyond the 72 counter on this Pen F half frame film camera here, not knowing that probably in those more modern cameras they've become a lot more efficient at frame spacing, so you could get those extra exposures on a typical 36 exposures on a 35mm roll. Whereas obviously with a more earlier film camera like this, the frame spacing probably isn't that accurate, hence why the limit of 72 probably is there for a reason, to stop you winding too far. And then in my case, when I tried to rewind the film back into its cartridge, I was met with a little bit of resistance, and I hold my hands up. At that point I probably should have stopped, put it into a changing bag like I got here and tried to solve it that way. But I persisted and I continued winding the film to the point where I've obviously felt a snap. So now this turns freely and I don't get the sense that it's kind of winding any film on, so that means that the film is probably broken off and it's still on the take-up spool here. I think as well, a difficulty I had with this camera is I did obviously press the button at the bottom of the camera which is supposed to release the film, but for whatever reason that didn't work. And when I've done a little bit of research since I've had this problem, people do seem to say that the problem with these cameras is the winding mechanism, in that it is a little bit of a weak link in this camera, especially if you take it beyond 72. And also as well, people were saying that the sprockets on the actual take-up spool, because these cameras are like quite old now, nearly 60 years old, they wear and they break down, and they could cause the film to jam when you are trying to wind it back into the cartridge. So that's where we are. Yeah, I feel like I could wind this until the cows come home and nothing would happen, because I suspect it's just turning the cartridge and the actual film is somewhere around here. Right, so this obviously happened a few days ago. I obviously at the time went through a lot of emotions ranging from fear, despondency, disbelief. Yeah, it's one of those things when something goes wrong, you kind of, your heart and sinks a little bit. And yeah, I was worried that even though I wouldn't say that they're class leading exposures on this roll of film, it's still exposures that I'd quite like to actually see get developed. So yeah, so after a couple of days, I've kind of made a plan now, hence why I'm filming this video and sharing this experience with you, hopefully as well to kind of keep me on the straight and narrow. And I've written down a kind of a process that hopefully will get me out of this mess, which I will follow through with you here today. So I've definitely learnt my lesson. If this all works out today and I get the film out, I manage to develop it okay, and the film camera is working as intended and there's no damage to any of its kind of internal components, I probably will only take it to about 70 or 72 exposures in the future, just to try and avoid that from happening. And that's one of the things I'm going to do in this video, is once I've done the worst bit in terms of getting the film into a position where I can develop it, I will run a new test roll through this camera to see whether I can get to 70, 72 exposures safely and get the film out of the camera safely as well, back in the cartridge and allowing me to open the back. But obviously I bought this camera as fully working, so if I do find that there is an issue with the winding mechanism in trying to return the film back into its cartridge, I probably will seek a refund, because obviously you need to be able to rewind the film when you finish the roll back into the cartridge. I don't want to have to go through this extra step every time that I want to use this camera. And this isn't the first time that this has happened to me, actually. I did have a problem with a roll of film in my, actually another Olympus camera, the Olympus OM2N, which is a full frame 35mm film camera. But as this was before the days where I've had the lab box, all I did then was, I think I waited till I was in a dark place, opened the back up, took the film out, put it into like a container like this, and then sent it to a lab to be developed. But obviously since then I've now got my lab box, so I kind of feel like I want to have a crack at trying to fix this problem myself. Hence why I've invested in a changing bag here for, I suspect, probably many more mishaps that I will experience as I'm kind of journeying through film photography. Apologies if you see me reading my notes. This is quite important. Obviously I don't want this to go wrong, so I am, like I said, I have made a plan with notes and steps, so I'll just, hopefully that will help get me through this. Right, so first things first, I need to get the film out of the camera safely, and then I need to put it into my lab box here, all in the dark, because obviously once I open the back and expose the film to light, that's ruined the film. So somehow I've got to do all this in the dark. I have used a changing bag once before, and that was when I used 35mm film on my Holger, and because the Holger isn't really designed for 35mm film, there was no way of getting the film back into the cartridge after I'd used the film, so I borrowed a changing bag then to complete that action. But obviously now I've invested in my own changing bag, so hopefully I can do these kind of things for myself in the future. So yeah, so first things, get the film out and then obviously put it through the lab box, but it's going to have to be a little bit unconventional method to get into the lab box, because obviously normally you just put the cartridge in here, clip it into the guide, then put the lid on and then wind it in. But obviously I'm going to have to do that in the dark again. So yeah, I'm going to do it with a test roll first, just to make sure that it's going to work on my real roll. But first things first, I need to get the film out of the camera. So yeah, I'll talk you through each stage as well, what I'm going to do, and then hopefully we can both get out the other end okay. So let's get cracking with getting the film out of this box. And for that, I'm going to put obviously the camera, and I'm going to put this little container into the changing bag as well, because if I do manage to get the film off the spool, then obviously it's going to need to go into a light tight container while I kind of practice putting a test roll through the actual lab box here. Obviously over time I feel like they've cheapened down the design a little bit of these bags, because the one I use, I borrowed from someone who's had film for ages, is it had 2 zips, whereas this has just got a zip and Velcro. I'm not sure how far you go in with these, so I thought maybe get my elbow in. I was going to say I hope it loosens over time, but in anything you don't really want it to loosen up. Oh god, yeah. Whew. Right. Oh, this is good fun. Right. Okay, right, so I'm finding my way around the camera a minute. So right, let's press that release button again. So press the release button. Right, let's open the back of the camera. There we go, the back is open. And it actually does feel that it's, what I'm feeling is the bit that obviously secures into the take-up rules. So it's actually yanked the whole thing out, what it feels like, of the cartridge. So that's good in one respect, because it means there's nothing in that cartridge. So right, so let's just try and pull the film out. And it gives me something to hold on to as well, so I can try and free the film up. And actually it is coming off the reel actually really easily, so that's really good. I was really worried about that. So let's try and wrap it into a ball. So I'm just rolling up the film now inside on itself. Yeah, my biggest fear was that I was gonna have to try and wind it in on itself, but I might just try and make the circle a bit tighter, because if I can't get it into the film pot, that's going to be another problem in itself as well. The reason I'm winding it this way as well is because it'll give me then a leader at the end, so that'll give me something to feed into the lab box at the end. Right, so that's the whole of the film. Right, let's see if I can get it into this box now. Oops, too big. So let's see if I can put it tighter. Ah, there we go. Got it into the container. Right, so let's just find the lid. And the moment of truth. So there's the film, there's the cartridge, and there's my camera. Right, so my next thing I'm going to do is obviously I'm going to put my lab box, which is configured for 35mm film, into the changing bag. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice my 24 exposure roll here. And what I'll do is I will wheel this all out. Right, so that's the end of the row. I'm going to cut it. Like so. It's been a good test roll, this. Just put that there a minute. Right, so then what I will do is I'll get this into some similar configuration to what the actual film is. One thing I have done though is obviously I've cut off the leader to demonstrate before, so I might just cut a makeshift leader a minute, just so I've got something to try and get back square when I'm putting it back through the lab box. So is that a good representation? Right, so I'll let's finish with that for now. Right, so I'll put this, my lab box, in the changer bag, and then I will attempt to get this correctly onto the reel in the lab box. Yeah, so I'm going to try and feed it underneath the cutter still. So this is obviously going to be free down here, hence the unconventional route. So I'm going to try and level it up. I'm going to obviously try and cut it square once I've got the leader through. And then I'm going to feed this down into the guide briefly and use that to help me find the center part of the negative to clip the clip piece on. And then I'll bring it out, make sure I can hear the click, and then take it back in, and then wind all of the film onto the box. And then once that's done, I'll just put the lid on to make it secure, and then I'll bring it out of the bag, and then we can see how well my test effort has gone. And then obviously I'll take the lid off, and I can have a look then to see how successful I was, and whether I need to have another test run or whether I'm happy. So let's take that back out. Obviously this is going to be in the pot in the actual lab box itself, and put the lab box in. So maybe I'll just put it in a pot just for completeness. So there we go, one test pot. Close it back up. Tight. So let's take the film out. find the leader. There we go. Right, so underneath the guide, fiddly. Well, there we go. Right, so it's under the guide, and I'll feed it down the, yeah, it's under the guide. Right, so let's see if I can cut the leader square. This is going to be the trickiest bit. Making sure I cut it flat. If I hold it down to the guide as well, that helps, I guess. Let's just pull that out of the guide a minute. Right, so I feel that's good. Right, so if I just move my fingers away from the cutter, cut her up, cut her down, and yeah, that's cut. So yeah, so what now I can do is dispose of that leader bit. Then I need to find the square edge again, feed that back under the guide, the cutter, because I do feel that helps keep it square. Right, now comes the tricky bit, I think, the clip. Trying to clip it into the centre. Right, so I feel like that is good. So if I just push down a minute, bring it out. Yeah. Right, I might just have to try and clip this on manually. There you go, so you hear a bit of a click. Right, so then make sure it goes into the guide, and then hopefully you'll hear it in a minute go around the lap box. There you go, it's all on the lap box. So I'll put the lid on. Right, so that's now sealed up. So let's see how well I've done on this test. Right, let's see how successful I was. Okay, right, so if I just take this out, so you can see hopefully that the film has gone on to the reel here. I take it out. So if I finish development, let's pull it out. I just want to see now how square that initial cut was, and how close to the centre I was with the pin. And actually, if you look at it, I did a pretty good job actually. There we go. Look at that there. So pretty in the centre, and it's well clipped on, and obviously it took it into the reel. Okay, so right, now on to the reel film. Right, wish me luck. Right, so the lap box is going in, lid, and the roll of film. Seal it back up. Right, I'm going in. Oh, this arm feels a bit tighter, whether it's got more muscles on this arm. Deep breaths. Right. Film's out. Just got to try and find the leader now. Well, there's the leader. Right, so it's underneath the guide. So I think I'm ready to cut. So it's cut. Without touching the film. Right, cut. Put the cut back down. Right, that has cut. So does this feel square? Feel square, right, so back underneath the cutter. Right, so it's the same as before. Might just try and clip it in manually. Yeah, it feels in the centre. Right, so then help it go down the guide. Fiddly. Let me just, I was going to say let me just take a look at what's going on, but obviously you can't do that. Right, let's try it. Yeah, so obviously because it pulled out of the cartridge, it's almost got the end bit, and I can feel when I rotate it that it is catching on that. So, but I don't think I can do anything about that other than trying to cut that off, and I think I would have to start again if I did that. So I feel like confident that it's on the reel. It's just that last bit of tail. I'm not sure what damage that is going to do to the film. So right, so let's put the lid on. Right, so I'm confident that the film is now in the lab box. The lid is on, so it is light tight. So let's now take it out. Whew. Thus ends the use of the changing bag, hopefully, today. So there we go. And yeah, so I didn't manage to be quite as good with this, but still it was a square cut, and I did feel like it wound on to the lab box okay. Right, so what I'll do now obviously is I'll develop the film in my normal way. I'm not going to bother filming that. I've got plenty of other videos on YouTube saying how I go through the process of using the lab box, and I'll put a link up to the playlist here which has got them all in. But what I'll do is I will develop it obviously, and then I'll know once I've got it out drying how successful the actual exposures on the Pen F, because I've never used the Pen F before, so I was using the Sunny 16 rule, so who knows whether that actually worked as intended. And then I'll take a few snaps of the negatives or whatever comes out on the line to dry, and then I'll come back in while that's drying and I will talk through the other aspects now that I need to check to make sure that I can use that camera again and it's working as intended. So yeah, so wish me luck, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Right, so hopefully you can see from that little bit of B-roll that the operation has been a roaring success. Yes, I'd probably do something slightly different if I ever had to do that again, but hopefully I won't be in that position again. But basically I've saved this little bit of film here, which is the last bit of film, I'm guessing, that was wrapped around the actual cartridge here. And basically when I was in the changing bag and I was feeding it in, I could feel this at the end of the roll when it was kind of winding onto the lab box. And I made the decision then just to leave it on because I didn't really want to handle the film any more than I wanted to in order to get the film developed. So I left it in, so I heard it flapping for the entire 9-minute development time, then the 1-minute ilford stop process, and then also the 5-minute fixer period thereafter. But as soon as that was over, I opened the box up and then I did actually cut this piece off before I then rinsed the rest of the film. I've subsequently given this bit of film another bit of a rinse as well, because it does kind of help show me what actually went wrong with this particular film and the use in the Pen F here. So what went wrong? When I loaded the film initially into the camera, you have to kind of wind it on until you hit that start mark on the actual camera counter. Yeah, so maybe it's something I'm going to have to check, but when you see the S counter, I'm just wondering whether that's the point that you then start shooting your exposures, because I carried on winding with the lens cap on until I got to number 1, or what I thought was number 1, because it's quite hard to accurately determine what number on the counter you're actually up to. And as a result of that, anyway, you can see on the film that the first 2 35mm exposures, so the first 4 half frames, were completely blank, and they were when I was just winding the film on to that 1 mark on the camera. And that's not normally a problem, but because I was doing something different with this film, I was actually not using an external light meter or even a phone app light meter, I was actually working out all my exposures using what they call the sunny 16 rule, there's a kind of an alternative rule that's based upon the sunny 16 rule for other lighting conditions. And because that was my first time doing that, I wanted to make a note of every exposure, what the scene was, what settings I used, so that I could get a sense of whether the sunny 16 rule did really work for me and for my compositions. So because I made notes on at least 72 exposures, that doesn't account the first 4 that I completely missed because of my misunderstanding, I guess, of how the counter works, and that maybe you can start firing when you're on that S mark. I'll put a note down the bottom of the video whether you're supposed to start at that S or whether you're supposed to start at 1. But regardless of that, in terms of the actual film, I was actually up to exposure 5 before I started counting. So when I got to exposure 72, technically I was on exposure 77, and I know I went beyond that, and you can tell with this little bit of frame here that I just kept on firing away like an idiot, even after I'd gone past the 72 marker on the Pen F camera here, which is its maximum counter. And you can see right to the end of the film, there were still these half exposures being made on this piece of film. So with that being said, so all of this was being wound out of this cartridge onto the take-up spool of the camera. So what you were left with in the actual cartridge was probably this piece here, and if you can see, it's only got sprockets holes on one of its sides. So when I then try to wind the film back into the cartridge, you can see why there might have been a bit of a problem, in that the camera didn't really have a lot of purchase on the film, or the cartridge didn't have a lot of purchase on the film to enable that action, and that might be a reason why it failed. If the camera's only designed for 72 exposures and I took it well beyond that, then maybe the design was not up to winding that much film in. But anyway, what I'm going to do now anyway is I'm just going to check over the camera to see if it's still in working condition, and I'm going to run through another test roll into it as well, just to make sure it's all working as intended, and take it up to 70 on the counter, because I think I'm going to allow myself in the future a bit of a safety margin. So I'll just shoot up to 70 and then I'll call it a day, and then wind it back in to the cartridge, just to avoid another situation like I've had to deal with in this video. Right, so let's open the camera up. Right, so let's have a look at the sprockets. Fire off. Yeah, all the teeth in the sprockets look okay to me, so I'll put in a roll of film now, and just wind it on up to 70 to see how we get on. So this is a new test roll. Obviously I cut my last test roll up to make sure in the changer bag that I could get the film onto the lab box. And anyway, my old test roll was only 24 exposures, so it wouldn't really have helped me that much in this particular experiment. So my new test roll was 36 exposures, and it's a roll of Kodak Gold 200 that I was given in a batch of film. So it's definitely long expired, and as I know you can still get Kodak Gold 200, I thought this was probably a good film to waste. So let's get it loaded in, get it into the slot. I did find aligning it to the slot was a little bit difficult. Right, so that's being taken up now nicely by the camera, so I'll switch the back. Yeah, so it's on S now, so I'm pretty sure you've got to get to 1. Right, so I would say that is exposure number 1 on this film. Right, so I'm going to speed through this, obviously, because I've got to get up to 72, which might take a few minutes. There's no burst mode on this camera, but make sure you pull that stroke right all the way through. Right, I'm up to 32. And it actually has a gold 40. I wonder what that is for. Because obviously a 24 exposure film would do 48 exposures. So I'm not quite sure why the 40 is in gold. If anyone's got any ideas, then please put that in the comments below. I'll be grateful to hear. A bit closer for a few. As you can hear, it's not the ideal street photography tool. Right, so I'm getting close to the business end now. That was 68. So that was up, so I'm up now to probably about 71, 72. So I think I will stop there and I will try and rewind this film back into the cartridge. So you get that ready. And then you press the button underneath here to release the sprocket, like so. And then in theory, you wind this in. Oh yeah, that feels a lot better. I definitely felt like resistance right away, because it was obviously struggling to wind it. There we go, and it's released from the other side. So if I lift the back up now, the counter resets, and you can see there the film is back in the compartment. So that's really good news in that this camera does appear to be working correctly, and it was just my stupid mistakes before that led to that particular issue. So good test roll. It serves its purpose for today. Right, so I wasn't intending to show any images from this particular roll. If you've been following my channel, I would have already put up, probably by now, the first video where I talk about why I bought this camera, how it works, what I was going to do the first time, you know, use the Sunny 16 rule, no light meter, etc. And then at the end of that video, I would have put up some of my favorite images that I've just developed now, which I haven't yet put into a video, but anyway, I won't talk about. But anyway, they'll be in that first video. Then obviously there'll be this video, which is talking about that particular problem I had with getting the film, with using too much of the film and then struggling to get it out because it broke when I was winding it back in. And then I'm also planning a third film which will go into all the exposures I've taken. And basically, because like I said, I took notes for every exposure that I did, and I can kind of talk about whether I feel that I under or overexposed for a particular scene, whether I didn't get the depth of field correct for what I was intending in that particular composition, and other aspects as well. Like for the entire roll as well, I tried to shoot one subject in two different ways. So they coined the phrase diptych, which is basically, hopefully I was trying to tell a little bit more of a story rather than what you would get with just one image on its own, which can tell a story as well, but sometimes two images can complement each other. And there were situations as well where I did take single compositions and I tried other things as well, like I bought a lens adapter for this so I could put my existing black and white monochrome filters on. So I did a bit of experimentation with that as well, and looking at the negatives, a lot of them have worked as intended. So yeah, so that third video will be talking through all of those exposures from this particular roll of film, maybe even some of these as well, just to, for my own benefit as well, just to see whether the experiment of using that Sunny 16 method of metering is actually worth using. Because I must say, it was really liberating not to have to go out with a light meter and just kind of make an assessment on the available light, and then that then allowed me to set the correct, or what I thought was the correct, shutter speed or aperture. So anyway, thanks for being here with me on this video. It's helped me, I think, to have you there when I've been running through this particular process, because again, it could have gone either way. I was fully expecting to have a lot more trouble in getting the film out of the camera, because I assumed that the sprocket was just completely jammed, so I would have had to try and like feed the film the other way to get it out, but thankfully that didn't happen. But instead it took me a while to get it into the actual film pot. But anyway, it did work anyway, and hopefully when I scan the images, I'll be really pleased with some of the images. As always, if you've got any questions or comments or feedback or pointers or whatever with Pen F film, or anything that I've kind of covered in today's video, then please let me know in the comments below. So, as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.